Chocolate, burn it down like an arsonist. Pull out the meds, cause I'm trying to bring the biz to kids. Yeah.
And there it is. Awesome, 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 awesome. Whoop. Perfect. There we go. How about let's do this. There it is. All right, folks. Good evening, good day, good morning, wherever you're at. Thanks for joining the Eyes and Ears show with your conductor, Charles. I'm very happy to have you all here. Let's hold on. What am I trying? I'm trying to change. You know what? It'll change once I get everybody else in here. Okay, so yeah, welcome to tonight's show. Tonight, folks, I wanted to take it in. There's a lot going on in the news about wars and rumors of wars and chaos and destruction and Iran and Israel and U.S. and this and that. It's good sometimes to take a step back and just chill out with maybe a little bit of history, a little bit of reading, a little bit of religion, whatever you want to get into. But it's nice to kind of step away from the drama and the chaos that's going on and take a look at the bigger picture of things of what's really happening or what might be happening. So tonight's show is just that. It's kind of talking about Masons, a favorite topic of mine, Mormons, and old American societies that kind of function and push all these things together, and maybe the connection between the two, because some people don't realize there are connections and links between the two groups. So we will be talking about that, and of course, I've got some people joining me tonight, and it's going to be a trio. So I'm very happy to have the folks here, and let's let everybody on. There we go. Perfect. Perfect,
Howdy.
folks. We got Shelly.
Hi.
We got Shelly
Hi.
Olmsted of the N Artist Collective, JJ Vance, of course, and Heidi Love, returning guests. I'll let everybody introduce themselves. Guys, go ahead. Thanks for being here.
Oh, for sure. Thanks for the invite, Charles. Appreciate it. Oh, you want me to go
Yeah.
first? I'll go first. JJ
Yeah, go
Vance,
ahead.
host of Operation GCD, and more notably, not the vice president. Good to see you again, Charles. Enjoyed our previous conversations on your show and mine, and always great to see Heidi. And nice to meet you, ma'am. Shelly, nice to meet you. JJ
Nice to
Vance.
meet you.
Looking forward to the conversation.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Shelly Olmsted. I own anarchistcollective.com. It's an anarchist art collective. I used to do research and some media and stuff for AM Wake Up. And I've lived in upstate New York my whole life. And I currently live in Norwich, New York, which is in Shenango County, which is connected to the Mormon history. So
Awesome. And I am Heidi Love of the Unfiltered Rice. Thank you for inviting me back. I'm so happy to meet you, Shelly. Always lovely to see JJ and work with him. Being Exmos and all, right?
For sure.
So we're here.
I was
for
talking to an
fun.
Exmo this evening online, in fact, just before the show.
Awesome.
Or, I'm sorry, a current Mo. My apologies. My apologies. A current Mo.
A TBM, a True Blue Mormon.
Yeah, they were interested in tonight's conversation. What we were talking about with these bloodlines. I was just back and forth on the society stuff. I didn't mean to apologize for interjecting there, Heidi.
No,
you're
interesting. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So this is one episode where truly I'm kind of sitting back and I'm interested in learning. I'm going to sponge everything in and take a lot of you guys' info. I use my eyes and my ears, so I like to do a lot of research, and this is where things begin. I like to listen first and kind of take things in, and, maybe go from there. So I've Heidi and JJ, of course, I've had you guys on. We've talked about, Mormons, the story of the Mormons, and the background of a lot of these occult connections, Society of Cincinnati, etc. Shelly, you and I live in a very strange part of New York, Shenango County, very popular. Well, I should say, it has Masonic roots. It has Masonic roots and Mormon roots as well. So I thought it was nice to bring y'all two together, kind of the two groups of people here, and really just dive deep into the history of these old families, like these families, the ties to Mormonism. Why are these ties important? Where do they exist today? And I mean, we're gonna freestyle it, just go take the convo wherever it goes.
Nice. Looking forward to
it. And
it.
I know, JJ, I know you have some stuff too you kind of want to touch on. So yeah, this is kind of like a free for all as far as this goes.
Sure. Hey, I'm Charles. I'm always happy to answer any questions on the Society of Cincinnati, American history, or these bloodlines, and kind of the effects that these folks have had in these bloodlines going on to this day. But I'm happy to discuss any aspects of those you want to. I know Heidi and I were just before the show as well, just discussing some new discoveries and revelations on these matters.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Let's do this first. So how about this for the audience and just to kind of break start the conversation. Shelly, JJ, and Heidi, tell me where do your families hail from as far as you guys want to talk, and discuss, what ties you to, I guess, what gives you that qualification of discussing this? Where's your background coming from?
Heidi, Shelly, would you like to go ahead?
I can start. My family on both sides come from founding families of Hartford, Connecticut. We came in through Massachusetts Bay Colony. Some of us came through with Reverend Thomas Hooker. My mom is a Baldwin. We've got Templars and Crusaders in my family. And
Nice.
I'm related to Frederick Law Olmsted and one of the founding members of Colgate University, which I lived 20 minutes from. And there's my family lineage on both sides. It's a huge rabbit hole.
I know how that goes, Shelly. I know how that goes.
Yeah, we all find out unbeknownst to us why we're getting on the familysearch.org and go, what the hell is happening?
Yeah, Heidi's well versed in that from our discussions that she and I have had. She's well versed in those same topics of huge rabbit holes in her family tree.
Oh yeah, big, giant, funny rabbit holes that make you go, So I am Heidi Love. I do have my podcast, Unfiltered Rise. We talk about some of this stuff on there, and I don't know if it's a qualification, my birthright though, right? I just was born into a very pioneer Mormon family. I live in Utah. I'm still here. Yeah. Super fun. Apostate Exmo. No, it isn't. It's not fun. We have grandkids and parents here, so we don't want to leave. Yeah. So here we are.
Nice. Well, I guess I'll go next year. And, speaking of rabbit holes, I've just been in an ongoing rabbit hole of my family trees for about the past 15 years. So the Clan Vance hails from, back to these matters of the Revolution, allegedly is some records report. There's not any definitive records on this man in general, my forefather, let alone his military service. But a man by the name of Abner Vance allegedly served as a spy and the scout for George Washington in the wars of 1776. That would be the same common ancestor I have. Well, one of the primary common Vance man that I share with the actual vice president. I'm not the vice president. So you can see what I mean by these bloodlines and these families. So I would actually argue that Abner Vance was the biological son, I have argued, of George Washington and Martha Washington, Dandridge Washington. On paper, Abner's father was Matthew Vance, who grew up with George in Frederick, Virginia. And Matthew married Martha's first cousin. So biological, DNA tests would indicate Abner Vance is not a Vance, but he is most closely related to the descendants of Matthew Vance and Ann Jones Vance. And Martha's mother was Frances Jones. Frances Jones's grandfather was the so either way I cut it, whether I'm from Ann Jones Vance or descended there from George and Martha, Man and Martha's grandfather was the Reverend of Bruton Parish, Williamsburg, Virginia. And this is where the founding fathers in Virginia plotted the revolution in that church. They still ring the bell, in accordance with these, in a ceremonial fashion to recognize certain important dates, like the 4th of July, etc. They ring the bell on that church there. So I have a lot of heritage there. I come from Jamestown on that side. My other side, New England, strangely enough. Again, as we'll unpack, these society families, they do intermingle and intermarry across the north and the south ends of the society. Being the Society of the Cincinnati, being George Washington there, he started a secret society of his officers. All the original members were his officers in the war. They formed on a mound just south of Newburgh, New York. It's Friday the 13th of May of 1783. I forget the exact date, but very Templar, right? Very Templar, because these are the descendants of the Templar. They are the best way to look at the society is they are the modern day Templar. But in these families continuing like they did in the old world to intermingle amongst the Templar families, right? So I got Massachusetts Bay on one end and Jamestown on the other.
Wow. Very, very interesting. Y'all got some credentials as far as those. So I mean, and the point to say this isn't just to put y'all out there. It's just to like show that these things do go deep, and there are ties to a lot of people. A lot of people might be connected to this and not even know. A lot of people might be a part of this and not aware that, oh, my family's kind of tied into this. But I mean, a lot of these families do tie their roots back, especially the ones that are tight knit. They know who married whom. They know how far back it goes. They know exactly where it goes, and they know exactly why that makes them special. So, let's begin with the, I guess, Masonic and the Mormon connection. Shelley, I'll start with you because I know you talk a lot about this. Like New York, why is New York specifically? I guess why is New York special? Like describe Shenango County where we're at, and specifically our area. Why, and not just Shenango, but really like the surrounding counties as well. Why is this a hotbed of weirdness?
Oh, well, first of all, it's just been full of Masons since the very beginning. It's just you can't spit without finding a Masonic or an Eastern Star grave marker. It's just just how it is here. But there's a lot of industry, a lot of forerunners of industry and stuff like that, and corporations, and a lot of that stuff is based here. Norwich Pharmaceuticals is in Norwich. They invented Pepto-Bismol, and they were like one of the first, if not the first, producers of aspirin. And then there's oh god, I can't even remember off the top of my head, but it's been a giant rabbit hole looking into the history around here. And then the founder of co-founder and first president of IBM is from my hometown of Oneonta, and his son Sherman Fairchild is from Oneonta. He went on to open Fairchild Semiconductors and Fairchild Industries, where Werner von Braun was CEO in the 70s. Yeah, they're from my hometown. IBM was in Binghamton until it closed like a year or two ago, which is about an hour away too. And the Huntington Library in Oneonta, they went out west and basically settled in California, and a lot of the Huntington stuff that's named Huntington out in California is from named after the family in Oneonta.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with that Huntington family. I'm actually part of that, not that wing of the Huntington family, but a different wing. But that wing you're talking about, major players in California. The Albacore Club is kind of one of the fancy clubs in LA where they, the bougie folks of LA. That was started by one of the Huntingtons out there.
Is this Liza's family line? Do you know, JJ? Liza?
I don't know if that's the same. It's definitely the same family. There's no doubt about that. We're talking about the same family that starts the Skull and Bones, that are integral in the start of Mormonism, right, with the LDS, and also my ancestor, who's a Huntington, and Joseph Smith's a Huntington. So they're cousins. So my ancestor, Major Elias Buell of the Connecticut chapter of the Society of the Cincinnati, he was George Washington's essentially Secret Service when George Washington was in garrison in New York City, and his children intermarried with Jesse Root, who was the general and congressional delegate for the Continental Congress for Connecticut, and he's also an ancestor to folks like Ulysses S. Grant, or I like to call him Useless S. Grant, So you can see where these things intersect again. And Buell's a Huntington. His mother, Martha Huntington, he's descended from a fellow there in the Massachusetts Bay Area that is the descendant of all the Mormon leaders, many presidents, even Ted Bundy, a fellow by the name of John Lothrop, 2 P's. So Elias Buell, he's cousins with Joseph Smith's father, like third cousins through this Lothrop fellow. So he was a man in the know, and he, I think following, looking at some of that stuff, and again, his Huntington family, again, he's a Huntington. Is that why he's so involved in these things? We got the Huntington Trust, right? You got the Tafts and the Huntington Russells. All three of these families form the Skull and Bone. So you can see these, paint these pictures with these individuals, with these bloodlines that are seemingly very important folks in our history in the past, and I would argue still today.
Wow.
I brought up Liza just because I know me and JJ have talked about this before and found out we were related, but through the Huntingtons, I am also related. So you're probably related to us also. It's, you know.
Probably. I
As
would
far as
imagine
that, but
so.
as far as Xena Diantha,
This
go ahead.
actually, folks, this is actually family reunion. That's what this whole show is. Family reunion. Surprise! I'm related too. Surprise, surprise. You know.
Oh, you're a Huntington.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, but so okay, so there's these connections that we talk about. So JJ brought up Society of Cincinnati. Again, why are they significant? Were they all Masons? Are they tied to the Masons? Where? Let's start with that before we get to the Mormons. Like, let's build the foundation of these two things and kind of go from there.
That's a good question, Charles. So I would argue that many of the things Shelley was just describing as Freemasonic elements that you see there in the Oneida area, or was it Oneonta area?
Yeah.
Those are likely due to the Society of Cincinnati influence. Now, not all. The way I look at it is this: not all U.S. presidents were Freemasons, but all U.S. presidents have been members of the Society of Cincinnati because the original membership passed, like the Templar, they all hail from the Templar, right? These, especially the ranking officers of the society, right? For example, George Washington, the first president general of the Society of Cincinnati, he's descended from 10 of the 25 Knights Templar that brought us Magna Carta back in 1215.
Damn.
Right? Yeah. So that's considered the original Bill of Rights, right? That's what the modern day historians call the Bill of Rights as the Magna Carta 2.0. So it's weird that 560 plus years apart, we have 10 Knights Templar regaining their liberty and property back that was stolen from the King John, right? And while they were away at the Crusades. This is the tale seen in Robin Hood. And then we see 560 years later, we see the grandson, the 14th or 17th great grandson of 10 of those men, George Washington, being responsible for the Magna Carta 2.0. So you have to ask yourself, are these bloodline feuds that have been going on for a long time?
Yes. Yes, that answer is yes for me. Yeah.
So when I look at the Society of Cincinnati, I look at it in that context, right? So they're repeating the behaviors and acts of old through the same families and same deal, right? Same. So we the Freemasonic stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that were Freemasons, but I think in large part the anti-Masonic movement that kind of grew out of that same area of New York back in the late 1820s and 30s there. And this is the same time where Joseph Smith creates the Mormon Church in April of 1830 in Fayette, New York, a town named after the leader of the French chapter. So there's 13 American chapters and one French chapter of the Society of Cincinnati. And General Lafayette was the head of the French chapter, and Joseph Smith formed it in Lafayette, New York. I would argue in and around a mound, but that's a topic for a different day. And Smith's grandfather seems to have been a member out of the Massachusetts chapter. So of the Society of Cincinnati. So when we look at this Freemasonry society thing, there is some crossover, but I think a large part of the Freemasonry thing is a distraction, and the actual situation is the society. And Mormonism seems to have grown out of some of that same theology that those society guys are interested in. So, for example, the original officers, the reason why we know about all these mounds, many of which are all in your all's area, is because they mapped and surveyed these mounds. The original officers did of the society, the original membership. So we see that same trend with Joseph Smith and his the religion he creates there in around a mound in a society town. So it was, if he got passed down that membership from his grandfather to his father, who was still alive, so his father would have technically been the member at the time. But I'm just saying we can see that relation still there. And then a different founding father named Elias Boudinot wrote a book about the lost tribes of Israel coming over to America. A lot of wars and mound stuff. So we can see that published in 1818, 12 years before Smith creates, Mormonism or the Church of Christ on April of 1830. And they're in Fayette, New York. So I think the real focus is the society and understanding that not every president was a member of the Freemasons, but every president has been a member of the Society of Cincinnati, I think, is the important factor. That was a good explanation.
I do think that a lot of the anti-Mason sentiment these days is directly connected to the anti-Mason movement of the past. I think there's a lot of fear mongering that gets continued. I will be right back. My landlord is
I don't
calling.
disagree. I think the founding fathers had it right when they, and again, no offense to Catholics, when they banned the Vatican and the Church of England from coming into this country in 11 of the 13 colonies. So I think they had it right there.
Well, and we know with the anti-Mason movement, Joseph definitely comes up. He was kind of semi-fingered in that. Good Joe from Vermont was definitely kind of pointed of old Morgan himself, and then he marries up his wife. So, sticky.
And I would argue Captain William Morgan was a member of the society by virtue of his service as a captain in the Revolutionary War. Right? I think he was out of the. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think he was he fought out of the New York chapter. I think he fought out of maybe New Jersey.
We can't forget, Joseph's great grandpa, Captain Samuel Smith. He definitely is more important than people ever focus on. They kind of hide him in the shadows because he helped organize the Boston Tea Party, which people do not know. He was actually a statesman. He wasn't a poor farmer guy that was nobody. He served in these wars. He was very important. He was the one that actually came up with the idea. He didn't actually go there and participate because he was like high up pretty much in this whole situation. But we see this stuff and they hide him under a rock. And I couldn't figure out, like, what is going on? Like, Mormons are super patriotic. Why would they want to hide this guy? Well, he hung some witches. So, from Salem, he's in the Inquisition. So I think that they kind of just wanted to let's not talk about that one. Yeah.
Well, I think you hit on a very important part, though, in all this understanding of these bloodlines, the impact they have on society, et cetera, not just politics and not just exclusively within, maybe not exclusively within the membership of the society, but it's the families, right? So that whole Magna Carta thing was because King John had usurped his older brother's power, King Richard, the Knights Templar King Richard, while he was on crusade, and gave all the land and the kingdom back to the Vatican. And obviously Templars weren't happy when they got back, right? Again, that's a story told in Robin Hood. Well, what we're seeing here is what we see play out here still today, I think, and that is these cadet branches, right? Because King John was the younger brother of King Richard. He wasn't going to get land or power. So we see a lot of these land and power grabs amongst these same families, I think. So it's not only exclusively the membership, but it's the cadet branches that don't get that membership. They don't get that power. They don't get that, additional wealth, right?
Right.
Wow.
But in regards to the Salem witch trials, we can look at other parties, right? We can make a comparison to Joseph Smith and see this major figure in an occult ceremonial magic religion, right? I think that's an accurate description.
Well, methinks you protest too much. When people start hanging each other, I mean, usually it's like they're watching this go down and they're like, it was her. Well,
I think that was a land grab too. I think that was no different than the same power struggle I'm explaining that goes on amongst these bloodlines. The Salem witch trials was in my opinion, a money and power grab amongst various parties and people in there that all knew each other and were all interrelated. So, especially within Essex County and Salem at the time, right? But you look at other major occult figures. We can see
one
the
of
same
these was a
parallels.
wife to somebody. So, yeah.
Wow.
Who was that?
Yeah, definitely.
I
said one of these that was a wife. It was like a sister-in-law or something. So of course it's going to be a part of a land grab. And plus, if she's a pain, it's an easy way to be like, if she said, you know what, if you don't cut it out, I could see this happening. Like, if you don't cut it out, I'm going to tell them what you're doing in the cave with your friends at night with your little, water witching group, which is
witch. She's a witch. She's a witch. She's a witch.
Burner. And we can see that same story that Heidi just described with Joseph Smith to another major figure in the occult religions of America, and that is Jack Parsons. His third great grandfather Parsons was a captain. Probably knew Joseph Smith's forefather, the captain there in the Massachusetts during the war in 1776. And that man's grandmother, so Parsons' fifth great grandmother Parsons, was an accused witch in those same Salem witch trials. So why is it we see these major figures in occult religions in America, these ceremonial magic religions, Joseph Smith, Jack Parsons, they have the same paternal lineage, and that paternal lineage also goes right back to the Salem witch trials.
Damn, dude.
Mm-hmm. Well, look at Lumen Walters. They skip on him. Go ahead, Shelley.
So I will say that there is some Scottish mount magic. There's some of that in the family lines too. In my own family. We
You
all
just
have
said
abilities.
Scottish mountain magic?
Scottish
Folk
mountain
magic.
magic. Yeah.
Folk magic.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
You
folk
talking
magic.
like druid? Like, what are you talking about?
Solomonic.
It's
It's Solomonic magic,
hereditary
most likely.
abilities.
Wow.
We had water witchers in my family. I grew up hearing about my great grandmother reading the tea leaves every time she was done reading, drinking her tea, and doing her friend's tea leaves, and it's just
Wow.
that stuff that sticks around in family lines, like knowing herbal medicine and all that stuff. It gets brushed as witchcraft in the wrong climate, or just the right climate, depending on how you're looking at it.
For Joseph, there are specific, and they don't show these very often. I've presented them. I think I showed them on the last time we talked, but there are actual sigil magic, Solomonic magic. They want to make it seem like it is folk magic, like this, not a big deal, healer type stuff, but that's not what he was doing. He was doing some high advanced magical workings that I dare say he learned from his good buddy, Lumen Walters, who most likely, and I can't prove it, was a Martinist who had just returned from France and was a quote unquote doctor, but definitely was in these higher elite societies, because people always say, well, that can't be true. I mean, if you study Martinism at all, this fits so much better than the Scottish Rite Masonry, which was relatively newly organized at Joseph's time frame. To make it here and be that organized at that point, we're pulling a stretch. We got to go older. And so that's kind of where I kept digging, because I was like, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's got to be something better. And sure enough, I ran smack into it, but can't prove it. I mean, but his grimoires do.
I like those theories, Heidi, and I can't prove it either, but I have been working on finding and I've located the epicenter of at least one person, a French member of the Society of Cincinnati, a member of the Grand Orient Lodge in France, and they were practicing Martinism. So there is an epicenter of these activities. And now Scottish Freemasonry was introduced in France, I believe, in 1720 by a fellow by the name of Andrew Ramsay. And he was allegedly a member of the Priory of Sion, those people that protect the Templar bloodline, as in the Da Vinci Code. So,
wow.
His best friends were Alexander Pope and Sir Isaac Newton, the two other members allegedly in that same Priory of Sion.
Right. Why it makes sense for Joseph, he absolutely know what JJ's pointing at here, because he talks about being from a lineage where Jesus had other wives, and specifically names them and talks about this story. And this is a Templar story. Like, we absolutely know he was exposed to this, whether people want to accept that or not. Like we do. Yeah. I mean, it.
Are you all familiar with the House of Saud? You know, they got like 7 billion kids and grandchildren and things like that.
Right,
it's not that much different, these tales, you know what I mean? It's it's not one wife in one line, it's an extensive wives and extensive lines, and that's what Heidi's describing there. I think that's just the best. That's how I relate it. Look at the House of Saud now. That's the same kind of belief system the Templars have about where they came from and their king and their Mary, right?
Well, and we see this continue. Current day and age. We see this continue through the Kingston clan, which is an FLDS branch, but King's son, like, we get into this divine right to rule business, but they are people that never changed their beliefs from what Joseph originally put down. And they intermarry. They ended up getting enough money because I think they invested in Mavericks, which is like a gas station. So anyway, long story short, they ended up with money, and they support a lot of the politicians out here in Utah. Romney. Anyway, not anymore. But what I'm saying is they leave these people alone simply because they are contributors to, the cause of whatever causes people are doing. But they do marry their aunts and brothers and things, whoever the geneticist now says that they can. So, yeah, interesting.
Whoever the geneticist says they can.
Yeah, there's someone definitely tracking these things. There's someone definitely, not only the Mormons. There's definitely folks tracking these. I'm making this assessment based on looking at my family trees and seeing everything. Massachusetts Bay to Jamestown, there is someone tracking these things, right? And to that note, I don't think Abner Vance was the only hidden bloodline in America, because Heidi's got another example, and on top of that, I can provide one past her example.
Yes, my weird family tree, right? Yeah, I sent this to JJ, and we had this weird rabbit hole talk one night because I was like, You ever heard of this guy that was maybe the king's son that ran away and wasn't really 100% supposed to be there because illegitimate? And he's like, no, I know about this guy. And I'm like, well, he's completely not just in my family book. He's in, if I go to familysearch.org and all my DNA stuff is done, like he is there. And there's no denying it. This is through John Stewart Talbot. And this guy goes up to like currently the 10th, my 10th great grandpa, whatever 10 up is the King of England right now. And it's through this guy. So there's like, I mean, there's no denying it. This came from like, I had DNA done on both sides because I was a normie and I didn't know, like stupid. But anyway, I can go look all this stuff up and it's all genealogically mapped. I'm staring at it right now, and it goes to Roy Henry Bourbon, and then he married a Marie Medici, and then this goes to Philip.
Well, the Bourbons are part of the Society of French chapter. That's the royal line that comprises the Society of French chapter.
And it goes straight to Marie Antoinette.
You could be making it rain right now.
Right, I wish. I mean, listen though, how strange this is. Like, okay, straight to Marie Antoinette in my family line. We've got the Bourbons, the Orleans, the Medicis, and Marie Antoinette. Like, that's so strange. But then this guy comes here and he is just a poor Mormon and dies a poor Mormon. What? Like, what is going on that they are? I mean, I think I know me and JJ have had this talk a lot where we think they're literally stashing their bloodlines here. They made a brave new world. They put people here specifically. And honestly, it's popping up all over now with all these stupid tests. Like, I didn't know that. I knew my grandma said, like, yeah, we come from royalty. Everybody's grandma says that. Like, I was just like, okay, grandma, you know, like, whatever. That's okay. Like, that's fine. But then you start looking at all this stuff and it's vetted. And now with DNA, it's really vetted. You know, you just have the old book and then, you know, it gets into familysearch.org and it's there. And then, you know, with everything else now with ancestry stuff, you can look up all of this now. And it doesn't make any sense unless they're building a new world order, which the Mormons are. I mean, I'm just saying.
Well, again, it sounds wild, right? What we're saying, hiding these bloodlines, but there's numerous examples, not just Abner Vance, not just Heidi's there. The current king of, or prime minister, or president, sorry, the current president of France. If anyone's not familiar with the work of Xavier Rousseau, again, the society operates over there. I'm not saying he's part of the society. I'm saying he's a Rothschild. There's a French journalist named Xavier Rousseau who's done an extensive investigation in determining not only is Emmanuel Macron married to his father / husband wife. They're from this right. That's a true story. And who tried to put literally a giant golden dick statue on top of the renovated Notre Dame Cathedral. And you want to know how that's a Templar attack? The guy who built the Notre Dame Cathedral was the treasurer for the Templars. That was a Templar structure. So of
course.
And I sent
these
my
people want to put a giant golden dick.
I sent my stuff to JJ because it sounds so crazy.
I immediately knew what she was talking about. I'm like, yep. So the giant, I'm not kidding you, giant golden, not an obelisk, right?
It's always back to the dicks. I have to tell you guys, like, I'm not being crude. I really am not. Every time you turn around, like, why does Onassis make giant, like, dick? He got the foreskin of a whale and made bar stools. Like, why? What on earth are you doing? What are you doing?
I argue it's an ancient Babylonian sex cult, right? That's what we're dealing with.
It's been going back since the beginning of time.
Yeah, maybe even older than that, right?
Humans have always been drawing and building dicks.
Well, I think it's part of the worship of the phallus in the veneration of these sex cults.
It goes, it goes back.
Well, it's all about fertility.
The phallic symbols.
It's all about fertility. Yeah, and it's all about fertility. In fact, the world's largest effigy mound. It's about 40 miles from here in Ohio. For me, here in Ohio, the Serpent Mound. I've long argued that should be called the Sperm and the Egg Mound because it's not a serpent. It's actually depicting the initial creation of life, and then the actual mound helps you sustain that life because it reads the entire night sky, and you can the seasons, the equinoxes, everything, the moon cycle. That mound reads everything, and it depicts. It's a calendar of life, and it depicts the moment of inception of life, in my opinion. But these are very old things. But to my point there about the French president, he's definitely a Rothschild. He was the youngest Rothschild leader of the French Rothschild Bank. That's documented as well, and you can see how hugging and kissing with the Rothschild guy.
They put their family back there. They put the family boy to work the family money, really.
Yep. The secret family boy, though, right?
The secret family boy, yeah. The low
well, then you
boy.
you get into this crazy stuff, and people will definitely call you crazy if you go down this rabbit hole. But you can't help but notice, like, why are there shows like The Princess Bride and there's a farm boy, and like, where's the farm parents? Like, they hit these kids in plain sight. They really did.
Right.
And most of them didn't know where they came from, to be quite honest. I mean, easy way to do it.
For sure. And they don't know why things are happening in their lives. I'll say that for myself, because they don't have the proper context to understand what's going on around them. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that could be said for a lot of these characters. So one of Heidi's kinfolk and the Orleans clan there, the French families of the Orleans, part of the, I forgot, the Bourbon, part of the Bourbons there.
The Bourbon.
The Duke of Orleans, his son was a member of the Society of Cincinnati. He would also future king. He was 21 years old. He was a lieutenant commander in the revolution over there, because these were joint revolutions that people don't like to talk about. King Louis and Marie were on the society side. Shit went down in 1794, just like it did in a different nation. They tried to take over Sweden. That's also not discussed. But the society was doing a lot of shit in 1792. And one of Heidi's kinfolk, the future king of France, King Louis Philippe II, the Bourbon Restoration of France in 1830, he's banished. So from 1792 to 1794, he's lieutenant commander. They lop off the king's head and queen's head, on the Bastille Day business. 5 generals from the French chapter got their heads lopped off. Lafayette got shipped out of the country. I think he was imprisoned in Switzerland. This is the interesting dynamic that goes on with these things, but in why I'm saying they're hiding people, because then you see all these different things and people getting shifted off, their heads cutting off and everything else. So if you want someone to, you want to save the life of the future king, the heir to the throne for the Bourbon family, the 22-year-old lieutenant commander, well, you ship him off somewhere. So they shipped him off to Claremont County, Ohio, which is in a town founded by Major John Neville. He was the aide de camp to Marquis de Lafayette, the head of the French chapter, who was also the first cousin. He was also the first cousin of that same man, the future King Louis Philippe II. He hid out under assumed name for 12 years in Claremont County, Ohio, and Neville as the town school teacher. Now, he knew he was under an assumed name. He wasn't born like that, but I'm just saying, like, the people in that town didn't know. You know what I mean? And suddenly, and 12 years later, he's the king of France, or I think it was 16 years later. He was there for 12 years, but 16 years later, he's the king of France. He made a couple stops. He was gone for a while, hiding out. But I'm just saying we have another example of the society hiding out another society member, and actually, but the bloodlines, and doing so in a society town, right? So they keep it close knit. We know this now. Did they know that back then? I highly doubt it. Wow. Neville, Ohio, though, is built around a mound. Just saying. And George Washington surveyed that land.
Sounds like there's just orders on orders on orders on groups. It's like just layers of things, you know what I'm saying? And it's like the deeper you go, the more ingrained you are, the more badges you have. Just like the military, the more time you have in the rank, the more specialized badges you have, the more progression you get,
No, I totally agree with you, Charles. I'm sure you remember from your Air Force days. I mean, not that you necessarily dealt with things that were necessarily a need to know, but there's, I heard a really good description from someone, and it really rang home to me. This is how the military operates. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, and I never really considered this as a great explanation for how things operate in the military, but it is. And I heard, and it's imagine a world surrounded, where you got the same guys sweeping the floor next to some guy doing a bunch of top secret stuff, but neither one of them are really knowing which other's doing. So you don't have to be in an important role to be around important shit, is what I'm saying, in the military to a certain respect, right? And you really don't know what's going on when things are that compartmentalized. Like, that's my experience, at least, right?
Right. No, that's exactly what it is. And yeah, I don't know. It just makes me think about, like, y'all talked about all these different groups, and everything seems to revolve around the Society of Cincinnati. Like that connection seems to be everywhere.
You ain't kidding.
Yeah,
so true.
I started this journey roughly 17 years ago. I think 17 years ago in September, when I jogged past the Society of the Cincinnati headquarters on my daily jog there in DC when I was stationed there, Charles. So, it wasn't something I was looking for, and I've never been. The more I look at it, and even in more recent months, and having numerous conversations with Heidi on these topics, on and off, line conversations, it's literally everywhere, man. In fact, again, she hit me with Howard Hughes before the show tonight, and I was like, you know what? I never considered that.
I didn't mean to do that.
I looked it up, and I'm like, no shit. Howard Hughes is a very strong candidate for being a member of the Society of Cincinnati.
Wow.
Yeah. It's weird. Every single time I go look, they're either that or some sort of Illuminati, something, if they're not from America, right? Like Onassis is different, but he wasn't from here,
For sure.
So they all play together.
Well,
though.
I'm to the point, Charles. I'm sorry. How do you go ahead?
Oh, I just said same sandbox, just different castle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's the deal. Like, if you consider this as the Knights Templar, right, the modern day Knights Templar of the society, that is, and I would argue that we look at these things that we call parapolitics, and they're really just a family feud. So if we apply the fact that they're the modern day Knights Templar, and we consider the perspective that we're living in the medieval times, we live in a village, right, and we don't know the machinations of these knights and their bloodlines and everything else, and and all of a sudden, some event happens in town relative to obviously precisely these disputes within these families and these bloodlines, as I've already described, that existed in the old world. Well, they're going to explain that as like swamp gas. I'm using swamp gas as a jackassery in a very, hyperbolic manner, but they're going to give you an explanation of swamp gas to explain it. And that's what we're looking at with parapolitics, in my opinion, is the machinations of the same family feuds that have been going on for millennia, in my opinion, within these same bloodlines that are most recently represented in incidents such as the Magna Carta, and continue on to this day through their same descendants into the New World.
Now, okay, perfect. So talking about those descendants, right? If there's such a connection all around the board, and y'all might have touched on this a little bit, but Shelley, you really, like, I heard this from you first. Smith getting kicked out of the county, getting kicked out of this area because of his foolery. Let's talk about that.
He got charged of fraud, and the thing about the women, they just didn't like him, and just kicked him out of the county, kicked him out of New York State. And I think part of it was he was teaching women witchcraft. He was teaching them divination and stuff. That's basically what the stone in the hat is. It's just scrying on the go. That's all it is.
He was doing.
Do you think it was sex magic, Shelley? Do you think sex magic is included in that business?
Yeah, I would say sex magic.
I was going to say, with that many wives, it has to be, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. But I think he was actually getting close to something legitimate here. I think he was finding things here, and they didn't want him to find things either.
Yep.
Plus, he was probably sleeping with everybody's wives, so it would. He probably.
I 100% agree with you.
I
think you're right.
Strange. This place is really strange. Like, I've lived here for 5.5 years. I thought, it's. The first place I lived here at the end of the block is the old county courthouse. Is the county courthouse where he was held and tried. It only just dawned on me that's where the county jail was, recently. So it everything just seems to be all interrelated here. There's a lot of woo in the land. There's a lot of stories about lights in the sky, which I've seen. entities in the land, and then you go into like the Native American history. And I honestly think that when the Templars came to the U.S. to before it got settled by the colonists, I think they hid stuff in this region.
Absolutely.
I
I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. And
I've been thinking it sounded crazy this whole time.
No. I think they found stuff.
Yep.
I think they found stuff. And part of the Civil War was about that. About that.
Look, we see one thing here is Crowley, and people can dog him all they want, but this is something that he said is that, Joseph Smith was a young child. He hated religion, but he admired Joseph Smith. So he's giving us a clue there. Was he a disgusting pervert? Sure. But what I'm saying is he was telling us something in those writings that he maybe inadvertently didn't, because he hated everybody else. Anybody that stood for like religion or stuff like that, he was like, no, awful, awful, awful. But he admired Joseph Smith. Why? Because I think he knew he got his HGA, which is a holy guardian angel. I think he performed the Abermelon. I think he was teaching other people this magic. And it is specifically done, if people want to look up Martinism and the practice of Solomonic magic. When we look at this, it's done in the fall equinox or the spring equinox, where they say you can pierce the ether and speak to spirits. And when did it happen that he spoke to a spirit? It was on the fall equinox. I'm sorry. It is so clear to me. It's just clear to me. Yeah.
Well, you can see that also with Damien Eccles, Mr. West Memphis 3 himself.
He talks about it.
He talks about it. He venerates Crowley and Smith.
He specifically has a whole episode out about Joseph Smith. And fascinating to me that this guy would be talking about a religious leader. Like, that doesn't make any sense until you pull it apart by the seams. But they want to just blow it off as folk magic. Look, Freemasonry, the normal factions do not practice magic. Do they read about it? Do they study about it? All those things, yes. But Solomonic magic is practiced by the Martinists. They are a practicing order. Yep. It makes so much more sense. And especially when you bring into the fact, these French people that are going missing, getting shoved over here, like all this stuff. I mean, we don't know who was in touch with who. And I do know this. They tried to play off this whole Joseph Smith was a farm boy and he didn't know crap. Look, he couldn't write an English letter, is what they say. He's learning Hebrew from his Jewish teacher, right? Because if you can't understand English, you should definitely go try to do Hebrew, because that makes 100% sense, and that doesn't make any sense until you pull it apart and that his grandpa, Azazel, not Azazel, sounds close. Azazel Smith. Yeah. His cousins were interesting. Dr. Nathan Smith and Dr. Johnny Smith, both who opened, Dr. Nathan Smith was in charge of opening not only Dartmouth's medical school, but went on to open Yale's medical school, and he got chased out of town for digging up bodies. So I'm just saying that's and not allegedly. Somebody might have, I don't know, I might be not in the same place there, but I will say this, it's in a court case. He was chased out of town for digging up and stealing bodies. So that one's on the books for sure. They will try and obfuscate that that's not his cousin. And it's on both sides. And you have to go up through Uncle Jesse to find this, because they will lie their ass off. Look, they hide all of this stuff. They don't want you knowing they hail from Salem and they're practicing witchcraft and woo-woo stuff. Like, come on, that sounds really crazy. But Crowley saw this. He saw this, and that makes sense to me. I mean, I think you're 100% right, Shelley. I think they closed down the cave because they knew something was in there.
Well, you make some great points there, Heidi.
There's a cave system here I just found out about. And I've been saying for a few years now, this place is so freaking weird. I swear to God, there's a portal. I can't count how many doppelgangers I've seen in town. And I've just had so many strange occurrences here. And I was telling somebody local about this, and he's like, oh yeah, there's a portal right outside of town and it's in a cave, and I know exactly where it is because I used to go there.
Guess who talks about those portals? Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes talks about natural portals existing in like areas of the world, and he tried to replicate them. And so look, people, there's some books about this, whether or not he replicated it, I don't know, but they did say he absolutely encountered them for himself.
Interesting.
So,
Oh,
Well, I can tell you
I've
some.
always felt there is a portal in my hometown of Oneonta too. I think it
See?
has some. I think it's somehow
Well-
connected to the D&H roundhouse, but I haven't figured out how yet.
I can tell you one thing about Crowley and portals and mounds. There's some Crowleyites that have been doing mound rituals in Kentucky for decades, allegedly closing portals, but that's their claims right now. Now this is the Typhonian order and offshoots of it, so they're not officially OTO because Grant and Crowley had their big beef, but it's an offshoot of Thelema, and it's the one that mashes together with monsters, H.P. Lovecraft style. I would argue John Podesta and his pal Peter Lavenda, the UFO fella. They've known each other since '78. I would argue they're both part of the Typhonian order. I have a picture of, if folks don't believe me that Lavenda's in the OTO, I have a picture of him doing an OTO ritual on TV from the Discovery Channel, admitting to being an OTO guy. So they do love mounds. Whether they want to admit it or not, I got numerous instances where they're doing these mound rituals with portals. But on the note of sex magic, the first person to introduce sex magic in America was not Crowley, though. Well, I do agree with you on Crowley.
No. This Fraternus Saturni comes over and does a whole bunch of introductions to some weird stuff. Like, he's not the only one for sure. He just blew the lid off it.
Well, no, he's a major figure. I'm not downplaying that. I think you get some great points. I'm just saying, if you want to get, technically and chronologically speaking about it, and back to the society families there, Charles, a fellow by the name of Pascal Beverly Randolph and his Rosicrucian order would be the first ones introducing sex magic into America.
Around what
that
era?
we know of.
Pascal Beverly Randolph, you said?
Yeah, of the Virginia Randolphs. I'm a Virginia Randolph, so this would be a distant cousin of mine.
You mean the author of Sexual Magic?
That would be him, sir. I believe the year would have been about 1885, but I might be wrong on that. Let me look. What do you got there on a date?
Hold on.
1855, maybe? 1855 comes to mind?
This is all back to Babylon. Like, honestly, wherever it landed in America doesn't matter. I mean, it does because it's your family member. But in general, it probably was infiltrated all over the place. They just kept the DL.
I think it does matter, Heidi, because, again, we're back to the same families here we're talking about, right? The same bloodline.
Right.
1855, sir. I think it was September
1855. Okay, I got a different date. Yeah, 1855. Okay.
Yeah. What did you say? 1857? That might be. You might be right.
55, I think he said.
It's around that time.
Yes. It's 1800s, late 1800s.
Yeah, we'll call it pre-Civil War.
And you know what? Here, let's do a little. Let's do a glimpse from the book, from Pascal's book.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about then. And then you're familiar with the works of this man and how this is obviously still a book that gets discussed today. Then, as you're describing it to me right now.
Well, this is on Archives.
Yeah.
Sexual Magic, Pascal Beverly Randolph. Okay.
I'm looking up his relations to Thomas Jefferson, who's also a Randolph. They're not. I think they're third cousins.
Oh wow.
Hey, is that if you're looking genealogy stuff right now while we're chatting, will you find out if Beverly's a second surname or a middle for me? Because I got a lady that really matters if it's a surname.
Speaking of 33rd cousins, I am related to Barbara Bush and George W. Bush to the Pierce side. If Crowley is not her father, and it's really Pierce.
You beat me. I was about to say if she's the Pierce, right?
One or the other is my 33rd cousin.
Whoa!
I can't remember which one it is.
We can't control.
We
can't control it.
No, thanks. My uncle, my uncle Bob on the Baldwin side. He's the family genealogist. He has a degree in history, and I used to go to the New York State Historical Library with him in Cooperstown, and the Oneonta historical room in the library. And in the 90s on for a while when he was doing his genealogical research, and around the time of the Iraq War, he decided to lay that one on us. Like, hey, we're going to war. Hey, we're related to that warmonger. So it's like now it's playing which warmonger are we related to?
We can't control these things. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't choose
No.
your family. You can't choose your
No,
family.
you can't.
No, like when I wanted to cry about mine when I found out the Medicis, I
There
was
you
like,
go.
"Oh my gosh, I'm a lizard person." What? Yeah, that was all I thought.
I'm related to King Baldwin of Jerusalem, but I don't know how direct it is, but I'm related to him.
Oh.
So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think all these. I always argue with folks, question why. I get lots of questions from various directions and whatnot. Why I'm interested in genealogy, and I do have various reasons why I'm interested. But the fundamental reason I tell folks is if you don't, it's like a tree that doesn't have any roots. If you don't know where you came from, you're like a tree with no roots.
And those
It's
roots
also
squeal on people. P.S.
It's also a really interesting way to find out more about American history because, like, just going back into my own genealogy over the past few years has been, I knew about some stuff, but I kind of just left it to my uncle because he was obsessed with that stuff, and he's got all the family heirlooms, and my mom's really bitter about that, so I just kind of forgot about it. But I went back to it after a few things I experienced, and going into family history, your genealogy, it opens up a huge can of worms just with American history and just world history in general if you can find your genealogy that goes back far enough. And it doesn't even have to go back that far.
No, because we've been lied to the entire time in all history in this country. Like I was saying, I can argue many points of the Civil War has nothing to do with slavery, right? And how you were saying they were looking for artifacts. I can demonstrate how General Lee himself and two of his other generals breached Union territory, deep into Union territory, raiding Masonic lodges. I would argue Masonic lodges that I know were built on mounds. I would argue those contents of those mounds were in those Masonic lodges.
And what do we know? So I laughed when you brought up Zelf, but I will say this. Look, not Zelf on the shelf. Oh, no, that's a different elf. Right. But I will say this. We know that in the temple, in the ceremony, for those of us that have been through, that there is a password there that is considered one of the most important ones. And I do not have those oaths. I do not keep their secrets. I was not told that I was being inducted into a secret society of weirdness. So I don't go with the whole it's sacred, not secret, blah, blah, blah. Because look, they lie to people and they use people. So this is what they get from me. I'm like a mean ex-girlfriend. But this password is about marrow in the bones and how all this stuff is in this is like the most important thing, right? And JJ knows what I'm talking about. And it's just the sinews, and this whole thing is in the Bible. But it's talking about giants when they're talking about this. And I find this very interesting when we look at the fact that we've got the orphan trains in America. We've got kids coming out of nowhere that we really don't know. I mean, people blow that off and say, oh, that's just because people were dying, until you tell them how many pickled punks and how many orphan train riders there were. 250,000. That's right. You heard.
When you're talking about these giants, though, Heidi, I mean, don't forget that the giant human skeletons found in all these mounds, and these were the great interests of the society.
Hid. Yes, that they hid.
Well, I would argue they're hiding it because it's not them hiding it. I would argue that's the crown hiding it, like they've hid the crown history, because I can demonstrate that through the formation of the Smithsonian, which was founded to study the mounds by society folks. And I would argue that they think that they're descended from those giants. So
they absolutely do.
Oh, we were just discovering that some humans have Denisovan DNA. We know that some of us have Neanderthal DNA. And they keep on making these discoveries of all these different hominid DNAs that different peoples all over the world have within themselves, different regions.
Yes.
And it's real. There were giants.
Well, and you just showed that about Quakers. Go back up a little bit here. That's interesting that it says the Quaker giant and giantess. You do know that Joseph Smith is quoted that giant Quakers live on the moon. This sounds crazy.
Oh,
no, this is real. This is real. But listen, it gets worse. Brigham Young says that there are people from the sun. Now, as laughable as that is, go study esoteric studies, study the Golden Dawn, and study some of this stuff. not so cuckoo crazy. Then you start to see, like
You'll
he
also
wasn't
see
crazy.
Sirius. From the
Yes.
Rosicrucians to the Freemasons to Joseph Smith's story of Kolob and near the star Sirius, you'll see Sirius worship everywhere. From the Order of the Solar Temple to Heaven's Gate, you'll see Sirius worship everywhere. And all these ancient
And
alien
on the
cargo cults,
temple.
the commonality is the Sirius worship.
On the temple, every single temple has the Big Dipper, or so they say.
Have you heard of the Cardiff Giant? It was a fraud, but it was a big stone giant that Barnum was carrying around America, saying it was a giant. It's in the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, New York. I grew up seeing that all the time.
Is it
Yeah.
really?
Yep.
I've been to Cooperstown.
But
oh no shit. Okay.
I'm a bootleg
Giants.
Vermonter. I was born over there in Fairfield County, Connecticut, Ridgefield.
Yeah, my great grandfather and great grandfather and all of them owned a bunch of farmland in Westfield, in Cooperstown, right next to
Yeah, it's a
Cooperstown.
nice area.
Hops
Built
Farms.
on a mound.
Yeah. They owned a
The
lot of
baseball-
property there.
The Baseball Hall of Fame is also built on a mound, and the man who's at least credited with inventing baseball, I would argue that he probably didn't, but he's credited with it, and that's the important part. Abner Doubleday, general in the Union Army, member of the Society of Cincinnati, second president of the Theosophical Society after Madame Blavatsky. More serious
found
worship.
that out.
That's
found that out
an
recently.
interesting little fact.
That's a fun fact for you, Charles.
Going into
You want to look at
history-
occultism in the society? Look at Abner Doubleday.
Yeah,
You know what I
going
mean?
Abner
into history
Doubleday,
of
born June
itself.
26th. It's almost his birthday, y'all. We should light this young nigga a candle in 3 days. June
Charles,
26th.
We better not. He might
look
come
at
visit.
America's national sport here. He built the sport built and focused around a mound.
Wow.
Right?
Okay,
The
that
Hall of
makes
Fame's on a
sense.
mound. They even have
Yeah.
teams named the Giants. I'm just saying a lot of this stuff's in our face.
Yeah, he attended schools in Auburn and Cooperstown, New York, and in 1838 he was appointed a cadet in the U.S. Military Academy. He was an artillery officer in the Mexican War and fought in the Seminole War in Florida. At Fort Sumter, South Carolina, he commanded the gunners that fired the first shots by North in the American Civil War. What a nice feat.
Wait a second, sir. Did you say he started the American Civil War?
At Fort Sumter, South Carolina, he commanded the gunners that fired the first shots by the North in the American Civil War.
And no one talks about this guy, and he was a head occultist of the Theosophical Society as well.
Wow. Doubleday formulated the essential rules for baseball. Play ball.
I get so angry that all anybody associates with Cooperstown is baseball because it has the most fascinating history, and it goes back to like the elite of New York City and like all these big names and Revolutionary War and French and Indian War, and it's got
that's
really
how
fascinating history.
That's how they do it. That's what they do. They want us focused on stupid stuff.
Well, no, but everything you just named is all the same topic, I would argue, because everything you just named there, Shelley, is all around the Society of Cincinnati, and that's why the baseball Hall of Fame's there.
Plus that place is haunted as all hell. I swear to God, the whole town is
the
haunted.
Tunnels. It's the tunnels.
There's so many cave systems.
I'm not playing.
Oh, speaking of tunnels, so I went to First Baptist Church in Oneonta. I grew up with the family of somebody that was in the first Trump administration, and she's a writer for the Washington Times. And there's tunnels that go underneath that church across the street to Huntington Library and the other church across the street.
How close is the cemetery?
I don't know. There's no cemetery, but it was probably relocated. But
or is it built on a cemetery? An ancient cemetery?
It got sold. I don't know. It got sold. And it's now the Oneonta Chabad.
The Jewish center?
They call themselves the Jewish Dragon Family because SUNY Oneonta's mascot is the Red Dragons.
Of course it is.
Yes. And I found out that Jack Smith, Special Counsel Jack Smith, is a SUNY Oneonta graduate and a Red Dragon.
Wow.
Yeah, and he used to work
No
as
biggie.
Hague.
No biggie.
You know, they
That's
want
all
us to forget, but they
Yes.
don't forget crap. You ought to see the side of the mountain they blew out. He can pull it up. Pull up granite genealogical vault. That's a fun one.
How far are y'all away from Cincinnati, New York?
I'm not that far. I know I drive
Not far at all.
there through there, not like
Should go check
Yeah,
out that
okay.
situation. You'll see that there's mounds in that town, and then that's the reason why it's named Cincinnati.
there's so many mounds around here. It's hard to keep track.
And tunnels.
That's
Tunnels
Portland
everywhere.
County.
And
That's
tunnels,
like a county
caves.
away from us. That's not too far. That's not far.
And there's
Cincinnati.
stone croppings that don't seem like they're natural too.
Like dolmens, or like
Yeah. And
standing stones. We're talking standing
petroglyphs
stones, or like
and-
kind of okay, like cliff sides.
Yeah, you could dig just a few inches into the ground, pretty much anywhere, and you can find like arrowheads and whatever. We used to do that gardening. Every time we did some gardening and did tilling in the backyard, we find arrowheads. We found stone tools, a sharpening stone, stone sickles, like a sickle blade. We eventually threw them back in the ground because we didn't want to leave them out because bad stuff started happening after we dug it up.
I'm a big fan of your ideas there, Shelley, about the smithing gang finding stuff up there, because again, this is a society effort, and the society's very interested in these things. For example, when the Smithsonian was founded, the guys that did that first study of the mounds, the Squire and Davis, they brought in a guy from the French chapter named Laplangen. And Laplangen did some interesting studies after that initial mound study in America. He never went back to France. But they do a lot of these things. Napoleon, a member of the French chapter of the Society of Cincinnati, Napoleon Bonaparte. He's the reason why we know he did a huge study when he went over to Egypt there and the Sphinx and everything else. And it's still, that study is still considered the seminal study of ancient Egypt today in the Western world. So this is the interest of the society. So when you say you think they found stuff, I'm convinced they were digging in, looking for things. And when you say the Templar were here before, the Templar were here for hundreds and hundreds. This was their land. Like I said, they stole the land in 1215. Well, I would argue they stole that land here at a later date preceding 1492, but after 1362, the date marked on the date marked on a land claim that was found in Kensington, Minnesota, buried by the Knights Templar. Found in 1895, buried in 1362 with the various markings, the Kensington runestone. Back to Napoleon, America got that land from that land claim in a secret deal with Napoleon. Thomas Jefferson and a member of the Society of the Cincinnati, who was a member of British Parliament, in a secret deal, we got the Louisiana Purchase. It included Spain as well in that, more Templar descendants. So I would argue
we get into Lanzo Meadows. Yeah. They probably came up through there down.
There you go. I argue that land claim is representative of a much older situation, like you were just saying there, Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, right?
Well, we know that they definitely were pushing Mormons up to that area, and they were taking Native American brides, and I know that for a fact because I'm Micmac. So,
and we see that with the Micmacs, right?
Yeah.
There are very Scottish Sinclair-based, flags, and their seal or whatever, their crest.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's very interesting. They oftentimes tell the Mormons to take Native brides, and you guys won't like why. Well, first of all, I postulate they see magic like recognizes like some of the things they may have learned from their ancestors, right? But also, we can't dispute the fact that Brigham Young said, "Please buy up all the Native American children." He did say buy, and then they can become more white and delightsome. So.
Oh, of course, because when they're brighter, they're smarter.
Well, I would argue, though, also that what history seems to indicate is these folks have been intermingling and intermarrying for thousands of years, right? It's no different than you have Micmac heritage. I have Cherokee, not just the Georgia Cherokee. We got Cherokee in Vermont. I don't know if you all knew that. There was Cherokee up there as well. So I think these bloodlines have, in large part, and many of the bloodlines at least, have been marrying into the Micmacs and everything else. So when you're saying they recognize magic, well, they're recognizing its shared heritage. It's the same thing I think the Cherokee discovered when the Scots-Irish came down there in Western North Carolina and Georgia. They're building homes that were identical. How did these two civilizations, the Scots-Irish and the Cherokee, build the same structures for homes, right? Yet not know each other.
Yep.
Wow.
Exactly.
And reading up on the Merrimack, I guess the name or Micmac, the name Micmac comes from the word Nickmack, which means my close relatives. The correct spelling of their name is Micmag. However, the use of Micmac became very popular over the centuries. The Micmac were called various other names depending on the language spoken by the Europeans they got into contact with or the place they met. Indian from Cape Sable, Jespians, or Micmac from Gaspé, Maliseet, Shonek. Wow, all these tribes, Surquois and Tortine. However, between themselves, the Micmac called each other Unuk, which means the people. The Micmac share many similarities with the Maliseets of New Brunswick and Abenaki of New England, with the exception being that they were not farmers. Interesting.
Yeah, and there was a good comment from Buddy Cole in there that the Micmacs were indeed one of those native cultures here that had pre-Columbian writing systems.
And they prefer nowadays to be called Mi'kmaq. I'm not sure what the change was, but I did have somebody write into me that's from there. So shout out to him. He's the one that kind of spoke with me about the new changes. So, yeah.
I didn't know that. If you want to bring up their flag, Charles, and look at the cross of St. George, and you're going to see where the Templar influence is in that whole culture. I don't want to go on a limb and say that the Cherokee are descended from that, but there is an epicenter of activity with those folks in the Cherokee, in my opinion, because the Cherokee are far different than a lot of the other Iroquois Nation tribes there.
So there's that.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious.
See what I'm talking about? So
it looks very Muslim-y.
Well,
very
and I can fix that.
I
can solve that for you. So we've been misdescribed what the Templars' logos were. So at one point in time, they were depicting that crescent moon because they formed out of the Hashish assassins in the 11th century and down there in Jerusalem. And, the Morgan Freeman character from the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves 90s version of the tale, right? The Hashish assassin, right? To Kevin Costner. So that was the first one I really remember seeing. So that's the one that sticks in my brain hole. But the Hashish assassins, their uniforms were white with the star and the crescent moon. So you see a mixture of the Hashish assassins and the Templar stuff right here. They both wore white. The Templars put the cross on theirs. And at one point in time, I believe it's alleged, at least they did include the crescent moon. Because the Hashish assassins were the Islamic mysticism kind of, magic biz. And they were the kind of European magic biz, right?
Right.
But one of the founders of the Templars was part Sufi. Sufi.
Well, and Johnny Smith, that was at Dartmouth, where Joseph's Church of Christ was already formed underneath that cousin P.S. All of his theology is very interesting, and he didn't discover the whole breakdown of it. Doesn't take away that I think he definitely spoke to a spirit, but he also was completely immersed in these Eastern cultures and teaching some of these languages. Why would that be? That makes no sense, if they weren't influenced at some part. So yeah, it's interesting.
Wow.
But why would the Micmac Indians have the mashed together uniforms of the two units? Because people think the Hashish assassins and the Knights Templar were different. They were not, sir. I can assure you of that.
And this is, of course,
their organization, their composition, their leadership, all erupted from the same location at the same time, the same people.
Bill Cooper talks about this as well. That connection.
There you go.
That Mystery Babylon connection, of course, in that series. The Hashashins, the Muslim connection, the assassin connection, the Templar connection, all of that. It's just the same thing rolled down over the years. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. So we see the logos of the two units there in this flag with the Micmac Indians across the world. Right?
I think that all the Templar stuff can all be traced back to all the mystery schools, like the Essenes and the ones that they mixed all the different mixtures of all the different religions, spiritual paths, like
Sure.
all those mystery schools. I think it's all just continuation all the way back to Egypt and even
It
before that.
absolutely is. Yes, 100%, and it's still happening
sure.
because listen, what this Johnny Smith that I'm talking about, that's his grandpa's cousins or whatever, right? He's completely immersed in, and he's over these languages, multiple languages, but he's also super into Armenian and Armenian views, Armenianism, like all this stuff, controversies of the 1800s about this. Like that seems like a very strange topic of the time, right? And not only that, but we've got, all these learned people that are probably definitely involved in these Babylonian cults, which you can take your pick. It always goes back to that. But you're 100% right. When you look at this and you dissect it, you see it go back to the same thing every single time. It's not just the Mormons. I just pick on them because I was one. They lied to me. So, make a girl mad.
There's also evidence of the ancient Egyptians being in Ireland and Scotland and stuff. Also the Americas. So I mean, all this
Absolutely.
like Templar bloodline, all this like ancient ancient Christian bloodline can all be traced back to even the Egyptian bloodline, even in the European countries and the Americas. So the whole New World thing, I think it's like reclaiming ancient bloodlines that trace back to Egypt.
100%. Some people will tell you that. Some people will tell you that certain Mormon connections go straight back to Egypt, and Joseph was definitely one of those people trying to make those connections. You're
The further
right.
you dig
What
into
if Egypt
stuff,
was
the
here?
less crazy it sounds.
What if Egypt was what we call Egypt was here though?
The new Atlantis.
So that
I mean,
Laplangian guy I
it
was
could
telling you
be.
about before from the French chapter of the Society of Cincinnati that came over here on the start of the Smithsonian and helped out the two guys that ran that mound survey for the Smithsonian, Squire and Davis. Again, all society activities, right? From society descendants, even Mississippi Senator Jefferson Davis is the one who signed off on us in the Senate. So again, he actually protected mounds on the Mississippi River in War of 1812 from what is now known as Effigy Mound National Park. That was his assignment. He was the captain there. He was to protect those mounds. So this is all society stuff, is what I would argue. And relative to this Laplangian fella from the French, the hereditary member from the French chapter, he would go live with the Mayans. He would go on to he was kind of like a real world Indiana Jones. This is what he did after the mound survey. He never went back to Europe. He went down to the mines. He argued and documented his journals and studies that what we describe as the old world is actually here. We live in the old world.
Well, they do keep us out of the temple of Osiris and Isis that's at the Grand Canyon, don't they now? So,
and Laplangian was on. He goes over some of that stuff in his stuff. Not so much the Grand Canyon, but the culture that would have presented that.
I think Bimini Road is part of Atlantis, but I think Atlantis was a worldwide culture. It wasn't. I don't think it was just in one spot. I think there was basically capitals all over the world, and it branched out from that.
Like a kingdom type of thing, right?
Yeah.
What if we're looking at it wrong? It's more like a kingdom, right? What if we're looking at it wrong? It wasn't the whole world. It was a kingdom amongst other kingdoms like we do today. We're America amongst the Vatican, America amongst other countries, right? The Templars lived in what is known as France, Spain, Portugal, Scotland, England, etc. They had places in Madagascar, Goa, India, right? So what I'm saying is they were sovereign folks who had lived in their own kingdom, and that I view Atlantis in that respect. This is the same bloodlines. You go back; it existed at a time when other things existed in the world, but we're never as advanced. Because where did these folks learn these things? How do these bloodlines pass down advanced mathematics and astronomy through these bloodlines, so they can read maps in the night sky?
I would say epigenetics is really strong.
I agree. I think that's some of the occult secrets within these bloodlines and families and their organizations.
And look at all these places they touch also. So this is a Templar trail, just kind of showing you where their influences went. And with these influences, you take language, you take culture, you're exchanging traditions, you're exchanging knowledge, especially. There's resources going through this. Trade. merchant, like mercantilism. You get merchants in there, you get trade, commerce.
Yep.
This is so much more than just, oh, look, I got a flag, I believe in Jesus. Yeah, this is about Jesus. Peace. Thank you. There's so much more. You're going through Syria, Jordan, Israel, parts of Germany, the Mediterranean,
and missionary work.
Africa,
They would be recruiting.
missionary work.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, they would
Yeah.
absolutely be recruiting, just like
And
it's continuing now. And
Well, the
how
one thing I can
easy
say-
is it
Go
to
ahead.
send your kid off to mystery school if you just hide that? If you're from an elite bloodline and your kid needs to go learn some things at a mystery, college, that's a very simple thing to do if you're LDS, because you can just say that kid went on a mission and then for 2 years they're gone. So just saying.
Huh.
Well, no. On that same note, though, Heidi. So I think these things again, the advanced mathematics, astronomy, stuff like that, has been passed down through these generations and bloodlines. Again, for example, my forefather Abner Vance never went to school. He was a surveyor, much like all the rest of these guys surveying the mounds. Someone taught him advanced mathematics and surveying. And George Washington had those skill sets to the degree of a PhD level of mathematics at the age of 16, because these are passed down in their bloodlines and families, right? So what I'm saying is, there's, within that kind of mystery school aspect passed down in these bloodlines, I think you'll see that's where this occultism grows, right? That's why we see folks like Pascal Beverly Randolph coming over here and being an integral figure. That's why we see Joseph Smith. That's why we see the integral figure of Parsons with these same lineages, right? Because this is stuff that's been passed down for many generations behind the scenes, if you will, unbeknownst to the general public, or even folks in that family who aren't in the need to know, right? And it goes back to, in my opinion, if you look at these bloodlines, it's comprised of the royal families, who again comprise the Knights Templar, who claim to be descendants from a different king and queen than the Vatican, right? Jesus and Mary, back to the Kingdom of Edessa in the Templars' opinion, which is interesting considering their first crusade was in the Kingdom of Edessa. So I think what goes on here is all of these bloodlines that have been put down, so to speak, by the Vatican and the crown, the English crown, they've, kept these occult understandings and teachings, whether it be math or some darker shit, magic style, within the bloodlines. And that's why we see these integral figures within these bloodlines imposing these things on our culture to this day.
Yeah. Right. And Shelly, like, this is the thing I was saying at the AM Wake Up chat we had like a couple of days ago. Like, in my opinion, it's like however you want to put it, however people take it, whether it's an allegory or real, whatever. I believe something goes down. It goes back to like Cain and Abel. It goes down to the building of these cities and foundations. It goes back to like Tubal-Cain. It goes back to the fall, some kind of transfer of something alien, something foreign to mankind.
Absolutely,
something
yes, sir.
Out there in a way, connecting with people in a way which never happened before, in a way that just changed things moving forward. It created the haves and the have-nots, which we had before, but now just went on a whole different level. What do y'all think about that?
I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on that. And the secret at some point in time was Sirius, and that's why we see it all replicated throughout all these ancient alien cargo cults that worship, Mormons included. The Mormon God lives on the planet Kolob next to the star Sirius. So,
yes, definitely.
That's a great way to put it. I like your style,
think all that stuff is crazy. Like, I was just like, okay, all that stuff is crazy. You just made all that shit up.
Oh, I still think that.
Norwich.
Yeah, I still think that. Even when I was growing up in the Mormons for my first 22 years of my life, I wasn't really I was into the ideas and I'd ask questions, but no one else is. It's not. Again, these aren't things that are necessarily spoken about publicly. It's you're $100,000 in a few years into Scientology before you find out in their ancient alien cargo cult who Xenu is.
Right. Exactly.
I
for those that are uncomfortable with some of this chat, I get it. Like, we're Christians, it isn't the best thing to have to study, but also we're never going to get the answers that we need without studying these exact things. Like, people can say all day long, you're shielding or whatever, but you're not going to find your answers just like in a simple book. Like they're going to hide this stuff. That's what they do. So
the problem with organized religion is that each religion believes that they are the one true religion and everybody else are a bunch of heretics. Even within Christianity, all the
Are
different
you quoting
sects are
Joseph
like,
Smith, ma'am?
what?
Are you quoting Joseph Smith when you say that?
No.
You may not have intended to be quoting Joseph Smith, but you quoted Joseph Smith, I assure you.
Oopsie, channeled.
Almost verbatim.
This is the way I've been my whole life. I grew up with my mom saying,
"No, you're fine." I was just making a joke because I mean,
I grew up, you gotta hear
Fast
this.
and Testimony Sundays. You got up every Sunday and you said that. You said exactly what you just said in front of everybody.
From the time I was little, I heard my mom saying that Jesus was an alien. It's right there in the Bible. Just read the Bible. He came from outside and he saved everybody and then he left. This is just how I grew up. And I grew up Baptist, and then I got into Wicca when I was in my early teens, and then I ran a New Age store for a couple of years, and yeah, so like
you met a lot of varying peoples, varying groups of
oh god, peoples. Yeah, a lot of different people.
No, but you're spot on with the whole. This is the true religion. Everything else is. I mean, this is. I mean, from my earliest childhood and more in the LDS church, that's one of the they hammer that into your brain hole.
I used to love talking to Mormon missionaries because I thought I was convincing them to be more open-minded about other religions and spiritual beliefs.
Ooh,
and then
no, ma'am.
The past year, I'm learning more and more. I'm like, oh no, that's not what I was doing.
The teachings are strong. They were so strong they were going to teach you.
Wow.
You know what I mean? You weren't teaching them anything, in my opinion. I mean, that's what would be my general assessment of my interactions with such activities.
It started when I was running the New Age store because, I'd run into. I used to wear pentagrams and stuff all the time. The store was called Pentacles.
I'll get you. That'll get a Mormon's attention real quick if they see you.
Yeah,
like that.
I was a huge target from Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, and I'm like,
yeah,
Mormon
pentagram.
Kids are so sweet.
Yeah.
The Jehovah's Witnesses I used to run away from because they would just harass you, but the Mormons, I would just chill out and listen, talk to them.
They're basically the same.
Cool.
As long as you're not an apostate, they'll chat with you.
Yeah, this is all stuff I've always believed, and they always seemed really interested in the stuff I had to say. I really thought I was opening their minds to be more open towards other people's spiritual beliefs, and I guess I wasn't.
That's a very reasonable thought. I agree with you. That's not how these things work. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are very similar to this whole conversation. Not only are they millenarianisms, they kind of came out of that same Millerism movement, where Oliver Cowdery. Not Oliver Cowdery. Why do I always forget that dude's name, Heidi?
Yes.
You do this every time?
I think it is. Or no.
Did I get it right?
No, it's Rigdon. Sidney Rigdon.
Sidney Rigdon. There we go. I always say Oliver Cowdery, and we always play this game of Sidney Rigdon was a major figure in that Campbellite Miller movement, and we later see the offshoot of the Jehovah's Witnesses out of that same movement. Major Joseph Smith's all of his Kirtland crowd, if you will, when y'all were describing how he got booted out of your region in New York. They go to Kirtland, right? Sidney Rigdon brings his whole Millerites, Campbellites. He was a minister in Pittsburgh. They brings him up to Kirtland, which is interesting too, because when you consider Solomon Spaulding, another member of the Society of Cincinnati, who wrote another allegedly fictional story about these mounds and these wars over here in America that was used as a basis, allegedly, as the basis of the Book of Mormon. I would say yes, because again, Solomon Spaulding was a member of the Cincinnati, appears out of New Hampshire, and he also knew the Smiths for a very long time, didn't he, Hattie?
He went to Dartmouth College with them. Dartmouth College, they will turn it around and say, well, it was Dartmouth Indian College and it's not the same thing. I'm like, yeah, it was in the same building, and don't act like it had anything to do with just because you're poor or whatever. It had to do with they were training up to be preachers to these people that were called Indians at the time. So it wasn't like it was, they make it seem like it wasn't educational. They kind of blow it off, but Hiram actually graduated almost from there. Within a year he would have been done, and he went to school with Solomon Spaulding, who also was taught underneath Johnny Smith, Professor Johnny Smith, all this Church of Christ stuff. So
Yep. All
this
this
goes way
so
back
that
further.
Heidi makes some great points here, because after she brought this up to my attention, I'm no longer willing to blame the Millerites and the Campbellites. They got it from the Smiths.
Yes.
And Sidney
And
Rigdon
it's
joins that
all
movement, also knows Solomon Spaulding. So we can see these, as were explained to them, disparate characters from different areas of the Northeast, seemingly all coming together in the same spot. But then you go back, they all know each other, and they're all
of
part of
his
the same
theology
secret society.
is still there. Yeah, all of his theology is still there for you guys to go read. They had to attend class, I think, like church meeting 4 times or 3 times a day. But you can go read all of his stuff, all of his outlines about it, and it talks about premortal existence and blah blah blah. Like everything that we know in modern Mormonism today came from Johnny Smith. Where he got it from, I don't know, but he sure does talk about Armenia a lot, and that's all
I can tell you where he got it from, and that's probably the Bloodlines. And you want to talk about Armenia? When the Knights Templar went on them crusades, they discovered archives that had been separated in the fall of the Western Roman Empire, arguably, according to Clan Vance, by one of my ancestors, Visigoth the Great, from the Goths folks who sacked Western Rome in 450, I think, or 500 AD. That separated the knowledge in the Eastern and Western Roman Empire. So when the Templars went over there, they got a bunch of information from that area of Armenia and modern day Armenia and Syria and Turkey, southern Turkey there. So when you see these venerations, and we're speaking to these bloodlines getting passed down, and we can indicate that the story we're being told, these characters know each other. They go back further, and it seems the Smith family's around in these ideas. And again, we see that same Huntington family, the Huntington Russell family from the Skull and Bones and whatnot, and these other Huntington matters. Again, I'm admittedly Huntington as well, and so is so I'm not like bad mouthing the entire family, because again, there's obviously ins and outs and what have yous to these matters, but nonetheless, we see them creating Jehovah's Witnesses, another ancient alien cargo cult that is strikingly similar to Mormonism or Scientology or whatever else you want to describe it to these same alien beliefs, cargo cult belief systems. And
they always talk to an angel. Yep.
Well, that's
I will say,
write a book and do some sex stuff. That's what it is.
Angels or aliens or demons, they're kind of all in the same mix, right?
I will say New York State has a very rich history, a very rich, very long history of being very culty, and a lot of different religions and spiritual movements have come out of here. So
you ain't kidding.
Yeah, it's spiritualism got started here. This is funny. My previous primary care physician over 20 years in Oneonta, through Fox Hospital, nonetheless. His wife is a Lily Dale certified psychic and spiritual counselor, and she opened up a spiritual center in Oneonta like a year or 2 ago.
Oh, so the bloodline and tradition continues, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's really interesting around here. It's like I said, like the more you dig, the more interesting and crazy it gets. Like it's more interesting than anything you can make up.
Well, I would argue one of the reasons Smith got thrown out.
I don't think they made it up.
Is because there's an internal feud from varying factions within that society, the Cincinnati. These would be the same folks that decided, I would argue, or at least an opposing faction in that group that murdered Smith because they didn't want him to become president of the United States and make everybody Mormon.
Do you think Brigham Young had anything to do with Joseph Smith's death?
Absolutely,
100%.
Okay.
I would argue Smith. I would argue Smith was pro-liberty. I break these society feuds down like this, and there's other lower breakdowns, but on a strategic level, it's anti-liberty and pro-liberty, and I would say Brigham Young's firmly on that anti-liberty side of that society.
Yeah, so Brigham Young was his childhood home is right outside of Norwich, and this area is very industrial. It has a very rich industrial history. And
his name
everything
and his heritage is very occultic. Yeah.
Yeah, everything I've read about him, he gives me that Alexander Hamilton asshole vibe.
Hamilton, the dick, the control.
No,
I understand what you're saying.
Is it Hamilton? No, or is it?
No, it's Hamilton. He's got a bad reputation. Although I would argue that he's been bad mouthed.
He brought us right back into chains and all that. Just
is that Old Hickory?
Oh, Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson. Maybe that's who I was thinking.
He had a worse reputation. No, but you were right. You were spot on with Hamilton. He got a smear campaign. So Alexander Hamilton was the second president general of the Society of the Cincinnati. I would argue this is the first public manifestation of that pro-liberty, anti-liberty movement in 1804, when New York Society of the Cincinnati member Aaron Burr murdered Alexander Hamilton, the president general, before officially trying to start a coup in America. So American historians now say, look, Aaron Burr murdered Hamilton over some weird personal beef, and then he tried to take over America. No. He murdered the president general of the society, and then he tried to take over America. And again, he was a member. This is an internal factional dispute. So, and I would argue George Washington was poisoned on July 4th, 1799, when he retired and bestowed the new leadership of the society onto Alexander Hamilton. There was a vote.
Makes sense.
There was a vote, but he passed down the reins that day.
Yeah, considering the description of his death, he could very possibly have been poisoned.
Oh, he didn't have a last will and testament. He got back in the carriage ride from Philadelphia that day and went back to Mount Vernon. 3 days, he was deathly ill the entire ride. It's in his journal.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah, it's in his journals. He never recovered. He called his attorney when he got back. He was totally healthy. He built 2 70-foot-tall Adena-style mounds at the gate of Mount Vernon in the years preceding this event. He may have been 67, but he was a very healthy man.
Wow.
He also loved pot and whiskey. So I don't know if that's in my bloodline, but I would argue it might be.
That's where it comes from, huh? It's from the founding father.
Mounds, pot, whiskey, and guns. I mean, I just think it's the heritage.
No, folks. So you know what? We're gonna start wrapping it up and kind of winding down here a little bit. But no, that this was a great ad from all y'all. I learned so much today. You know, it's very, very interesting. But to wrap it up, I guess I'll wrap it up with a question, and hopefully I get an answer from all you guys. So the Society, Masons, Mormons, all these bloodlines, it's all here. It's all relevant. As we're seeing like drama unfolding in the world, as we're seeing just chaos, controlled chaos, order out of chaos, as we're trying to see, where do you see these old, like everything we talked about today, how does it fit in with what we're seeing and kind of maybe where it pushes, you know, what we're seeing?
I'll go first. I'm optimistic, Charles. And I'm optimistic for this reason. We live in strange times. From 2020, I started calling the world meme world, and I argued that we went through 3 subsequent years of meme world as like Hollywood sequels. These sequels are far shittier. Each subsequent sequel is far shittier than the original. So 2024 was 4 times as worse as 2020. But we live in a post meme world 2025 now. This is what I've been saying since January, and it gets more post meme world every day. We now have a French Protestant of Protestant ancestry. His father was the convert into Catholicism. A French Protestant American as a pope, who I don't know if he's a card-carrying member of the society. What I can tell you is his second great uncle was. And I can also tell you that he's got another forefather in his direct paternal line. That's through his mother's side. And through his direct paternal line, who I believe was an admiral in the French chapter of the Society of the Cincinnati. So do we have a Society of Cincinnati member as the Pope? I don't know.
Wow.
Just
so
saying.
For me, I see a lot of things that are completely obvious to me. I mean, I think Hegel said it best, your kids won't accept communism, but we'll feed it to them one spoonful at a time. And by the time you realize it, it will already be done. So when we speak about this and people say, well, the new world order is coming, I have news for you guys. It's here, because when you see these factions playing cards with each other, basically, when you see the Mormons be able to build right down the street from the Vatican itself, and that's sanctioned, and that happened in 2018 and everybody missed it, or when you see them buy Westminster Abbey and nobody said a word, maybe we need to look at the fact that this card game is coming to an abrupt, like, put your cards on the table and let's see what you got here. And so, I think that there is some games coming to a close. That doesn't mean our world ends, it just changes. And that also doesn't mean we don't stop putting ourselves in the position of staying close to God, being prepared for what we can do, and don't put your mental mindset into that 24 hours a day, because if you do, you're just powering it up. I completely believe that they do magic for a reason, and it is for energy.
Yeah.
And so when we speak about this kind of stuff, we need to say, you know what? That's fine. Let them put their cards on the table. But one day we're all going to get super irritated and pissed off, and they're not going to want us to come to their door. So we keep positive until they force our hand. Period.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and nobody should be killing each other. I don't like it. So for that.
Yeah, death is bad. May I add one caveat after Shelly answers the question, because I do want to frame something. As much as we discuss here tonight as facts, and I'm not disputing that we're not saying facts. I mean, these are all things that we can point to certain sources. I'm sure that I'm saying between Heidi and I that we've, all these society things we discuss and these other alternative painting of history. So I'm not inferring that, but I'm just saying, I do have some other thoughts on this idea of how much we do know or how much we don't know kind of idea.
The more you learn, the less you know.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to my point though, if I may, then we how many things have been written, talked about, TV shows, podcasts, etc., on the JFK assassination? I mean, endless, right? So a guy I had, frequent guest on Operation GCD, host of Raised by Giants, Ryder Lee, he presents an interesting argument by going through the Zapruder film and proving that did a whole documentary on it's on Netflix. I'm sorry, Amazon, Tubi, stuff like that. It's called JFKX. They demonstrate how it was all a work of Hollywood, that entire Zapruder thing. That was not actually shot in Dallas that day, etc. The whole thing, they debunked the whole video. So considering that, we know JFK was a member of the Society of Cincinnati. We know his father-in-law, Jack Bouvier, was a hereditary member from the Maryland chapter. Heidi brought that to my attention, some of her research, and it brings some interesting elements to that situation, because Lee Harvey Oswald is in all likely probability hereditary member from his third great-grandfather, Captain Joseph Oswald, in the Society of Cincinnati. His third cousin Oswald, once removed, Teddy Roosevelt. So what do we really know about this world when we're considering all these things, right?
It's all related. And plus, like, there are so many theories out there about everything. All we really know is that we're not being told what really happened. And we only have our ideas. It's just everything is a lie, and you can just only have our ideas and be like, I believe this. This is how I want to live my life.
And that Sirhan should not be in prison still.
No,
I have to say that. That is absolutely atrocious and ridiculous, because he did not do it. And and he did shoot a gun and he did hurt somebody, but he did not kill RFK. So that's just my
classic Patsy. Classic Patsy process job, right? The process church is all over that.
On my channel, I have 4 or 5 that I go down the rabbit hole on this, and I'm telling you guys, like, it's actually really sad because they MK Ultra'd the crap out of him. So, yeah,
he's documented being at Sharon Tate's house for a sex magic party with an English satanic cult in an INS investigatory document. That English satanic cult is the process, and there was a man standing next to RFK when he got shot by a member of the same process element, and that man was a secret CIA agent who was in Congress.
Thane Eugene Caesar, too, behind him.
That was the process and Howard Hughes connected assassin, but the guy standing next to him was U.S. Congressman Howard Lowenstein. He was a secret CIA agent. He was later killed by a mind-controlled assassin in 1980 in his own congressional office.
And they're all related somehow, right?
RFK talks about that he believes the same thing.
I can tell you how Howard Lowenstein's related. His staffer that picked him up from the airport when he flew back to Long Island from Los Angeles in June of '68, a confirmed member of the Process Church of the Final Judgment. So, the connections are deep there.
Caesar worked for Skunkworks underneath the owner of Skunkworks at that time, who was a Mormon. That is on my stuff. And he used to live in the Philippines, where Thane Eugene Caesar took off and lived the rest of his life. Just saying.
I would like to point also and to piggyback on Heidi's statements, Thane Eugene Caesar, ardent anti-Castro Cuban Nazi. Mm-hmm. So
hated.
And I would also argue the Mormons run the Process Church to the Final Judgment, and they always have since June 21st, 1968. 57 years ago, a few days ago, when I created a Process Church birthday card to celebrate the occasion when they invaded America. in their corporate documents, in those same corporate documents from June 21st of 68, they mention a quorum of the 70. They don't identify a quorum of the 70 within their own organization. However, within the state of Utah where they're incorporated, there is a quorum of the 70, isn't there, Heidi?
Yep, and a quorum
And
of the 50 that people do not know about. So.
Well, the quorum of the 70 relative to Hughes and gang, the people that run the Mormon Mafia that run Hughes would be the people that would be calling the shots within this quorum of the 70.
Absolutely. And one last thing on that whole fun thing is if you look at Onassis and his Onassis Foundation logo that is older, it looks just like a keyhole, just like the New Salt Lake City grounds look just like the Vatican, and they all look the same. They're telling us right to our face. We have Project Azorion, and right there by the Azor Islands, right there when we talk about Atlantis, and he who has the king makes the rules. And the Mormons took the king from Las Vegas, and he was never seen again. So that is Howard Hughes. So,
and one of the most, as much as I look at things, as much as I think I know and I don't know, like you're saying there, Shelley, Heidi introduced me to a theory recently that JFK Jr.'s actual father was Aristotle Onassis.
I think you would have to see the photo. The photo is
his features as possible.
Insane.
Looks very
the
Mediterranean,
picture.
doesn't he?
The picture
and
of them side by side is fantastic. That's on my Jackie O show on my channel. So
I think it's
he was cheating on Jackie, so I wouldn't be surprised if Jackie got knocked up by. It's just,
Jackie, her horse trainer from when she was 8 years old is George DeMornshield,
which is another reason why we should question the JFK system. Yeah.
Wow.
It's the whole thing. Yep.
Yeah, that's Lee Harvey Oswald's CIA handler. You mean to tell me he's known Jackie for what, 60 years by that point?
Uncle, just like Netanyahu for Elon, just in case people don't know that.
Well, to JFK Jr., Jack Bouvier passed down his hereditary membership in the society in the Maryland chapter, possibly also the French chapter. I haven't confirmed that, but definitely the Maryland chapter. He had one paternal descendant, JFK Jr. So when JFK Jr. started a magazine named George in 1990 and started this political rise that he was on before he met an untimely demise there on July 16th, 1999, a very ritualistic day, by the way, the same day George Washington founded Washington, D.C., same day they discover the atom bomb, and back then was a 45. The same day Apollo 11 launches to the moon, July 16th, 1969. JFK's murdered July 16th, 1999. JFK Jr., I mean, and at the time was most definitely the member of that hereditary line in the Maryland chapter.
And don't forget, that's how Onassis' son died as well, in an airplane taking off. So like when you and the mother for the Onassis, like he has one daughter and she dies in a bathtub. Okay, get the hell out of here. We're talking.
There's a lot of bathtub deaths.
Yeah, because it's ritualistic. If you know anything about the occult, it's very creepy. And she was 30 something and she had a heart attack from diet pills, y'all. No, let alone what happened to the mother of her. Let alone it's it's coming out. Onassis is on the way. Heidi's almost done with a book. So my last.
So if I can leave with this note on all these statements is we live in times where these things are described to us as conspiracy theories. Parapolitical events. These are family feuds, I would argue. We're described these family feuds
Illuminati
as swamp
feuds.
gas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These old bloodline
100%.
feuds. Again, it's no different than living in medieval times, and they're telling you it's swamp gas, and that's what happened. But really, it's they're just coming up with a cover story to explain whatever family feud thing has fallen out, where you're not in the need to know, even if you are in the bloodline. Sometimes you're still not in the need to know.
Yes, it's all back to the McCoys, right? Like the what you call it in McCoys. I can't remember the other one. Hatfields.
Ma'am, are you saying the Hatfield and McCoys? I'm both Hatfield and McCoys. So
no, you got to fight yourself.
That's what I'm saying. I'm a Scots Irishman who's a Hatfield, and my grandfather, Devil's Ann's Hatfield, is twice descended from Abner Vance. So my second great grandfather Vance is his first cousin. Twice.
I don't know how you keep
his
track
mother's
of
his
that.
first cousin also, so that's a different story altogether. But Abner Vance is allegedly buried next to Devil's Ann's today. But my grandmother Vance was a McCoy, so it's a union between those two same.
So are you constantly at battle with yourself?
Always. I'm Scotch Irish too. I'll fight myself if you give me enough time here.
Me and JJ found out we were related amongst all these checking things out, and we're not kidding. So
No, I believe you. Trust me. I've been doing the same thing too.
Yeah.
There's few bloodlines right there, the Hatfields and McCoys. I can demonstrate how they've intermarried. Now, I'm not the only example, but that, you know, some of the direct kids of those two feuds at the time are intermarrying. And we look at these things and we wonder, why is that one the most talked about feud? There was longer feuds, more bloody feuds, more murders feuds, or is that the most talked about because that's the great grandson of George Washington, Devil's Anne's Hatfield.
Oh, I
Makes
didn't know
sense.
that. Wow. Wow.
You see what I'm saying?
That's wild.
He's twice Abner Vance is Devil's Anne's Hatfield's grandfather twice over, both through his mother and his father.
I don't know how you keep track of this. I can get the king one because that's the only one I know.
Well, it's my family tree,
know
man.
it's
So,
10.
you know, and
Oh,
it's the family cemetery. They're buried on top of a hill down there in Logan County. So it's been
man.
a long interest of mine with specifically those folks there.
Well, I dare say it's one nation under Freemasonry and magic on the side. So it's a little hard to do the Pledge of Allegiance now, knowing that, but we still stand because we love all the people that have served for our country. But the words do not come out anymore. I just, it's so hard knowing, you know, we're not pledging to anybody but God anymore. Sorry. Not in my house. My son brought that up. Yeah. And so, but it's hard to have everything shattered. They say no one, what do they say? Don't meet the people you look up to or something because you'll be disappointed.
Don't meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed.
So it's kind of one of those things. But like I said, at the end of it all, we all become brothers and sisters in Christ. And so we just band together and make new families. It's fine. We'll be our own heroes. God can have us, and that's all we need. So uh-oh. Charles, are you talking?
Life goes on ultimately, and freedom is there. Exactly like I was saying, Heidi, I totally agree. But no, folks, I appreciate it. Y'all just dropped a lot of bombs. Y'all really kind of made connections. This ended up being a family reunion, like I said. This is pretty awesome. It was a nice little things. But folks, let's start with the lady, Shelly. Where can people find you? Shout out your stuff, everybody.
You can find me at Poison Owls on Twitter, also at AnarchistCo, all over the place, and anarchistcollective.com. It's anarchist art collective, and most Sundays we have open mic night on Rumble, and it's the Anarchist Collective. It's pretty easy to remember.
That's fun. Open mic. That's fun. I'll tune in sometime and check that out. That sounds like a great time. And thank you for having me on. Thank you for coming on. And JJ, always a pleasure. I am Heidi Love of the Unfiltered Rise. I'm everywhere podcasts are served. I do have my own website. If you don't like pod chasers, unfilteredrisepodcast.com. And I do have a Patreon if you can't get enough of my blabbing mouth. So there I am. JJ.
I'm up next. Okay. Now, Charles, I always appreciate the invite and conversation, sir. Always a good time. I still haven't listened to any Fish songs since we last spoke. However, I still have an affinity for them as a result from my bootleg Vermonter. So much respect there as always. Shelly, is excellent to meet you, ma'am. Enjoy the conversation. We might have to talk some more of these buried treasures. I have a lot of ideas in those departments already. So I like where your head's at. Definitely enjoy the conversation. And Heidi, yes, ma'am. As always, great talking all these secret societies, bloodlines, and our impromptu distant family kinfolk family reunion here. So that's always nice. And JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD, and not the vice president. Do not vote for me in 2028. I am not bombing anybody. I'm actually, despite spending 5 years in combat, I'm actually anti-war. I always have been. I wasn't pro-war then either, but. Nonetheless, my links, I'm sure Charles put in the notes. I'm doing live stuff. I probably more days than I can even keep track anymore. But I got Operation GCD Sundays and Operation GCD Thursdays that I do on the Patreon. Sundays I do my tales of true crime and high weirdness that have been in my life as I've traveled the world in America, in the Air Force, and other activities that I've done in the years as a poster child for the U.S. Air Force military police at one point in time. And I know Charles and I shared some Air Force stories or some war stories here last time you were on Operation GCD, and I always appreciate sharing some tales like that. So, and then Operation GCD Thursdays, the anatomy of satanic panic. Yes, there was satanic panic. I would argue organized and very much forced on the American public in a very, propagandized way there. And there was also simultaneously satanic murders. So these things are not mutually exclusive. And I would argue the propaganda campaign was to convince the other folks that these murders of humans and animals was not occurring. And much like these bloodline disputes, these things aren't that far off from one another. And these murders of humans and animals still occur today.
Right.
Ritualistic.
Yeah, and that's a deeper thing to go on. But I mean, yeah, folks, awesome. Thank you, JJ, Shelly, Heidi, all. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it, guys. Let's go off with some music. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching. Oh yeah, by the way, Eyes and Ears, of course, on X, Telegram. Mondays with Steve Poikinen, and of course Mondays my show as well. Thanks for watching, everybody. Follow me on X, follow my channel, all that good stuff. I appreciate it. Peace and love to everybody. Good night.